All right, it's time to teach our board what is right and what is wrong. So we're going to be comparing the guesses to our target word. We're going to color the tiles of the grid, and we're going to detect the cases of have we won, have we lost, have we exceeded our number of max attempts. And all of this to start with is going to relate to the logic of the game itself. So I'll go ahead and do that in the game.js file. Over here, let's just in comments here, think about what is it that we're going to try to do. We're going to have a list of possible words that we can guess. We'll have a target word that we're going to be trying to guess. And then we're going to have a function that will check the guesses and will return a results array. Now, our hope for this results array is to be a list of strings that matches the same number of the letters in the word that we're trying to guess. And what we're going to try to do with that is that have it to return an array of strings. Each string is basically the state of that letter at that position. So basically, if that first letter was correct in the correct position, it will return correct. If it was in a different location in the word, but not in the position in which you provided in your guess, then we'll return misplaced. If it does not exist in the word altogether, then we need to return back incorrect. And the reason we move that into our game.js file is that we want to isolate the logic that relates to the game itself versus the logic or the controller that interacts with the user, captures their input, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and start by creating our list of possible words. So here's my array, const possible words, and that'll be, let's just think of some words that are 5 characters. So apple, world, words, and we'll leave it at that. Let's also create another one for the target word, the one that we're going to be trying to guess. Now we want this to be dynamic. Obviously, we don't want to hard code a specific word that's the only word that our game is going to allow you to try to guess. So we're going to use the random function to generate a random index for us. Now this random function, if I hover over it, it will explain that it only returns numbers between 0 and 1. So if I need to get any numbers that are 0, 1, 2, 3 or whatever, I'm going to have to multiply that by whatever that number is. So if I want 3 possible numbers, then I'll multiply that by 3. Now, obviously this is going to return something that may look like 2.8 or 2.5. So we need to round that down or up to something that we're able to actually pass in as an index for our array. So I'll use the math floor function here. Now, if I want to test this out, I'm going to have to export both of these variables out, and I'll go back to my main.js file, and that's where I'm going to be importing it. So I'll go over here, import. Actually, we may not need to export the possible words. We just need to get the target word. So I'll switch back. I need to import the target word from my game.js file. Now, if I add in some sort of a console log over here, target word, save, go back here and save that as well. Let's go ahead and open the inspector, look into the console. We're getting the number 2. All right, if I refresh, 0, 1, 2. So at least we know we're getting the right indexes, but we're not getting the word itself. So what we need to do now is maybe instead of calling this target word, I'll copy this over and create another variable that I'll call random index. And here I'll be getting the possible word at that random index. Save. Now here we go. We get the word world. If I refresh, apple, world, apple. Okay, are we not getting the... Okay, here we go. We're getting words. So this is how I know that my function is working. It's iterating randomly over all the numbers that I have or all the words that I have. Now, this all looks great, except for when I come back over here and I add a word like return. In that case, I'll never hit this number, or I'll never hit that index because my number is hard-coded at 3. So what I could probably do here is change this so it goes to possible words dot length, And now, since I just talked about length, let me just add that as a word here as well. Now, this is going to be dynamic. Whenever I add a new word to my array, this is going to be updating along with it. Now, keep in mind, in a later video, we're going to be replacing this with an actual API that gets us some actual random words, not just a few words that we've hard-coded here. All right, so we're done with the first part. The next thing we're going to need to do is to create a function that will check the guesses. So that means the user will provide their guess as an argument, or basically the front end or the controller is going to provide the guess as a word. And what we're going to need to do here, and let's just go ahead and maybe type it out just so we can plan what we want to do here. We're going to convert the target word and the guess into arrays. What that would allow us to do is that we can iterate over those words, and we're going to compare. So we're going to iterate over the user guess and compare each letter at each index with the correct letter from the target. And because we're going to want to return an array of results, those results are basically going to be the descriptors of, is this letter in the correct place, is it in a misplaced place, or in an incorrect place, or does not exist in the word altogether. So let's go ahead and start doing that. I'll create target letters. And this will be whatever the target word. I'll split that using an empty string, which basically will mean that I'm returning back list of the letters that we have. We'll do the same thing for our guess letters. Now here's a situation that we have to think about. What if the letters that were provided in the guess were all in uppercase, but the words that we have here are all in lowercase? So that probably means we need to add in another step in our chain of processing here to actually convert whatever that word is to lowercase first. That way we're making sure that we're comparing two words of the same case. Okay. Now, after I've done that, I'm going to iterate over my guess letters. I'm actually going to use the map function. And as we know, the map function is similar to the for each, except that it also returns a result. So here I'm going to iterate over each letter and also give me the index of each of those letters. And now what I would like you to do is check if the letter equal the target letters at this current index. If that's the case, then we need to return correct. All right. Else, if the target letters include that letter, so it doesn't matter where it is, but it's just if it's included somewhere in this target letters array, then we want you to return misplaced. Otherwise, just return incorrect. All right, so that should be all the logic that we need. You see how it's slightly grayed out here? It's just basically indicating to you that this function have not been used in your file just yet. So one way to use it is by actually exporting it out so that we can go back to our main.js file and we'll go ahead and import that. So now we're basically ready to wire it up to the actual controller, the file that will interact with the user. So we're gonna scroll down to where we had the submit guess function, because that's where all the logic gonna need to be. So when the user hits the enter key, we'll call the submit guess function, which will do the following. Now let's also plan out exactly what we want to do here. We're gonna need to capture the user input. So we're gonna have to figure out all the letters from the current attempts that we have in the grid and bring that over here. Once we have it, we're gonna send it to the check guess function so that we can get back the results. And then we're gonna iterate over the tiles to apply the correct classes for the result. And then after that, we have to check for the actual game loop. So did we win? And if that is the case, we're going to need to give them some sort of an alert or some sort of a message that indicates the winning situation. Did we lose? And if the game is still in play, and in that case, we just need to advance our counter or our states here to go into the next line just so we can keep guessing. All right, let's go ahead and apply those. So how do we capture the user input? As we know from our HTML or from the function that we use to automatically create our dynamic grid, each of our cells will have an identifier that basically has the number of the row and the number of the columns. So we're gonna need to figure out which attempt we're on. So basically based on the variables right over here, the current attempt and the current position, we're gonna need to capture all the position for the current attempt, or basically all the columns for the current row. And that's how we will concatenate them together so we can form that word or that user guess. So over here, let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna create an array. I'll call it user guess. Actually, let me just do that as a string. Next, I'm gonna iterate over let column equal 0, while the column is less than the word length. So config.word length, that's where we define the word length here, and increase that counter by 1 at the end of each iteration cycle. And what we want you to do is basically capture the cell. So I'll copy this over here. The current attempt is going to be the same because that is the current row that we're on. However, for the current position, we're going to need to replace that with the value of column. So if I save this, here we go. That's what we get. Let me just minimize my screen a little bit just so they all fit on one line. And then after I've captured the cell, I need to update my user guess with an augmented assignment operator to basically capture the cell text content, whatever that text content is, whatever that letter is, just take it, append it into our current user guess, and now we should have our guess captured. Next, we need to pass it over to our function, our check guess function. But because this is going to return a result, so we'll capture that here. Constant results will be check the guess and pass in our user guess variable. Let's just go ahead and console log that here and see what do we get before we even move any further and try to update the tile colors. We'll save. So let's see if I try to guess the word apple here, and I don't know if that's the, oh, actually we didn't know this is not the word that we're trying to guess. We're trying to guess the word words because that's what we're console logging at line 2. If I hit return, here we go. We get on line 83, which is where we added our console log, a list that basically indicates that everything was correct. Okay, there might be a mistake here. Let me refresh and see what is happening. So the word that we're trying to guess is words. So if I type in world, that should be incorrect. All right, looks like my function in the game.js is just saying correct for everything. Okay, I see that problem here. We did not use a comparator. We actually used assignment. So I need to fix that by using my equality check instead. We'll try it again. The word is length, but I'm gonna guess world. Hit enter. Here we go. Everything was incorrect except for the second to last. It was just misplaced because the letter L exists in the word length. All right, so now we know that our function is working, our check guesses is working, and all we need to do at this point is iterate over our tiles and update their colors according to their result. So we'll do exactly the same. So we'll copy this for loop over here. And we're also going to be iterating over the columns for as long for the length of the word. We're going to capture the cell at the current attempt at the current column. But instead of capturing the user input, what we need to do is call cell.classList. So we need to update the class list by adding the following class. What is the class that we want to append over here? That will come from results at the column index. So for each position in our tiles, we're gonna capture whatever that result was in our results array, and that's what we're gonna add onto our tiles over here. Let's go ahead and save the file. Let's see what we get. If I type in the word world, hit enter, here we go. All the tiles are updated with colors that match the actual game and colors that actually represent what our guess was. So the first three were correct, the L is incorrect, the D is just misplaced. So now we know that we're on the right track. We need to just keep building onto our game loop here. Now, how do we check if we won or not? That basically means that every single character that comes out of this results array should be correct. So here's how we're gonna do this check. I'll create a variable, I'll call it is1. I'll use the every function from JavaScript arrays that basically will check if all the elements within an array matches a certain predicate or a certain condition. So let's go ahead and do that. And here's what we're going to be checking for. Is every result equal correct? Then we know that we have won. I can just go ahead and console is1 to double check. And let's see what that looks like. So the word is apple. So if I type in world and hit enter, we did not win yet. If I backspace and type in apple, right enter, everything is correct. And we also get the true. Obviously, we're not done with creating our game loop here. This is why I had to update the existing cells, but we'll fix that in a moment. Now that I know that we have won, we need to indicate to the user somehow that they've won. So I'll switch over to my index.html, and right above my game, or maybe inside the game over here, I'll create a paragraph. I'll give it an ID of result. This is just temporary for the time being, or game result for clarity, and we'll leave that empty. I'll switch over to my main.js. I'll capture my results or game result paragraph document .get element by ID, and it was the ID of get the game result. Is it result or results? Yeah, result. All right, and for the cleanliness of my code, I'll create a function here called show message that will receive some sort of a message and will update it onto that paragraph. So here's my game result paragraph. We need to update the text content of it to be whatever that message that will be provided. Okay, I'll switch over here and I'll check if is 1. Then we need to call this show message with u1. Let's test it out. The word is length. If I type in length, oh, this is a 6-letter word. We shouldn't have added that. Let me go back, remove this. We'll replace it with something like index. Okay, so let me switch back. The word to guess is apple. If I type in apple, hit return or enter, we get this message, you won. Awesome. Now, you notice if I hit the backspace, I'm still actually in the same row, and also I did not lock the input for the user. So to do that, let me go ahead and create another function that I'll call lock input. Now, similar to how we added an event listener to our document, so somewhere right around here, we need to also remove the event listener. Now, here's the catch. The remove event listener will also need that same function that you provided over here. So if we wanted to be able to do that, I'll have to create another function. I will call this handle key down. And let me just cut that and paste it there. And here I'll provide a reference to this function. And with that, everything should still work fine. Yeah, there we go. But now I'll go right around here and we'll add document, remove event listener. And the event that we're listening on is the key down. And the function that was being applied here was the handle key down function. We hit save. I'll go back to this one right here. If we won, I also want you to call lock input and save. Let's try it out. If the word is index and I guessed it, I won. If I try to hit the backspace or type in anything, the lock is now, or the key down event is no longer being listened to, so I'm not able to type in anything anymore. That is excellent. We're done with the is won situation. Now, how do we check if we lost? Let's create an is lost. And the only situation we would lose in this case is that if we exceed our number of max attempts. So if the current attempt is more than the config, the max attempts, then we should have lost. And in that case, we'll check if we lost. We also want to lock the input. And we also want to show a message to say you lost. We save that. Let's try it out. Now I don't want to type in 6 guesses, so let me just change my game config and make it 2 instead. Here we go. Now I only have to make 2 guesses. If I type in world, all right, we're closed. But if I type in, let's see, I'm not able to advance into the next line. All right, so that means right before we check if we lost, we actually need to push the counters for the current attempt and the current position. We need to push them down by 1 line. So let's do that. So right around here, let me increase the current attempt by 1. And let me reset the position to 0. That way, when we go into the next line, we're resetting the counter to start at the beginning of the line again. So the word is world, but I'm gonna type in words and apple. All right, I've lost, but I did not get the message to say that I have lost. Okay, we missed adding the equal sign because technically if we have not won, then we increase the attempt. So in this case here, my attempt equaled the number of max attempts. So we'll save. Let's try it again. Apple, here we go. I should not be able to hit the backspace anymore. I should not be able to update my input because we've locked that input. So with this, we've actually captured both the cases for is lost and the case for still in play. So now we technically have a fully playable loop. We're checking for the cases for won, lost, if the game is still in play. The one thing that we may have missed here is that the user can technically provide any invalid words and the game will still run based on that. Maybe in my check guess, let's add another function below that and let's call it is valid word. And this will take a word, and all it will do right now is basically check if this exists in our possible words. So we'll do return possible words dot include that word. If it doesn't, we'll just assume that this is not even a real word and we're gonna reject that. So let's call is valid word, provide our guess, and let's just make sure that we convert that to lowercase and capture the result here. Is valid equal whatever comes back from this function, and we'll check if it is not valid. We're gonna return, basically do nothing, so we're not gonna check for any of those things. And we'll hit save. Let's see if that works. If I do world, this is the valid word. Let's refresh. If I do something random, hit enter. All right, line 90 and 86. So 86 is returning undefined. Line 90 is saying I cannot read the property 0 of undefined. So let's see what that looks like on line 90 of our main.js. So right around here, because it's trying to iterate or loop over our undefined result, this is where we're getting that error. But what we actually need to do here is to capture if result is undefined, or we can do it if it's not result. If there is nothing in results, we need to, well, we're gonna return. So basically don't try to execute the rest of this logic here, but also we want you to show a message saying invalid word. Save that. Let's see what happens if I try to type in something random. Hit enter, we get this message. We're not getting any errors. I'm technically still able to erase my guess and type in something that is valid because we have not actually executed all the functions that would lock my input or even try to advance me into the next row. Now we have a playable loop and we're ready to move on with some actual APIs to get some actual words and validate the guesses that the users are trying to do. And we'll do that in the next video.